I am guessing that you, whoever's watching this, have some level of discipline but sometimes fall for these bad habits. Today, I will share with you some of the things that will drastically improve the way you deal with them. And I will also later in the video share a danger that you might be facing regarding this, so don't miss out on that. Have you also noticed the recurring theme that you stay disciplined throughout the day, but then later on, usually in the evening, you start failing? You get home from work and even though you planned on doing something else during the evening, you start the TV. Some vague excuses swiftly pass through your mind before you get distracted by the noise, such as, I deserve some TV time, or I'll have time for that other stuff later. I made a video about ego depletion recently, and this is exactly what that is. Ego depletion is the term used to describe the decline of willpower we all experience from doing something that requires willpower. So when you wake up in the morning, you have a good amount of willpower, you have a good amount of mental energy, which then often gets spent throughout the day because you have work and other duties. When you've spent mental energy, you are much more vulnerable to giving in to cravings because you are worse at practicing self-discipline. The studies on this are really interesting, and if you want to read more about it, I would recommend that you read Thinking Fast and Slow. So ego depletion is why you after a long day just crash down on your couch and mindlessly watch Netflix. And this becomes a habit. So even on days when you haven't really experienced that much of ego depletion and you still feel energized when you get home, you're used to doing it. So you simply sit down on that couch and watch TV anyways. So the approach to this is usually stop watching TV, do something productive instead. And while I obviously agree with that sentence, it doesn't really provide you with anything of value because we all know that we should be productive and do important things instead of just watching TV. And that sentence basically just says, yeah, this is what you should do. And it's like, yeah, we all know that, but how? And that's why I'm here, because I will give you some actionable steps. And the reason that this stop watching TV, do something productive instead mindset doesn't really work is because even though you think, yeah, that's probably true, I should do that. Even though you think so in the morning when you wake up or during the day when you still have a lot of mental energy, later on in the day, you will have experienced ego depletion. So when you get home, you most likely won't have the mental resources to make the right decision and be productive. Although we don't even have to aim for you being productive when you get home and it's late in the evening. You're gonna be tired after a long day, so it might not even work well if you experience really strong ego depletion. The main goal here is for you to just not give in to the cravings. Step one is not doing the good stuff and being productive. It's just not doing the bad stuff and watching TV. Just taking an evening walk instead of watching TV is a huge step and would be incredibly worth it. So chances are you won't be able to rely on discipline when it's later in the day, which means you have to find another way. How do you avoid performing a bad habit when you know that you will fail and give in to the craving? Well, we know from Atomic Habits that there are 4 steps to every habit: cue, craving, response, and reward. The cue is, for example, you walking into a dark room, which triggers the craving of having the room brighter than it is right now, which leads to the response of you flipping the light switch, which in turn leads to the reward. You're no longer in a room that's dark. And if you add something that enhances or fights against each of these steps, you can make a good habit easy to cultivate and a bad habit easy to get rid of. So if we're thinking about the bad habits here, and if we're trying to apply this to the ego depletion example of you getting home later in the day, if we're talking bad habits, for the cue, you make it invisible. And this is something we can work with. What things are you easily triggered by that are just out in the open when you're at home? The TV is probably a good example. Storing the TV in the garage or basement or just at least in another room, that would be a very efficient solution for this. Another example, don't have unhealthy food visible when you're home. Keep the healthy stuff more visible in the fridge, and if you have candy or something, then put it on the top shelf deep in so you never see it. And for the next step, for the craving, you make it unattractive. And since this one is difficult to work on when ego depletion has reduced your ability to practice self-discipline, you have to focus on what you can do to avoid performing the bad habit. Which brings us to step 3, the response. To avoid the response, you make it difficult. You basically just add as much friction as you can. This leads to you actually having to go through trouble to perform the habit. And since the reason you're watching TV is that you don't really feel like doing anything or going through any form of trouble, this I would say is the ultimate counter to ego depletion. So for the TV example, here are some forms of friction that you could add. Number 1, put the remote controller somewhere far away, not just in a different room. I mean, if you live in a house, you can put it in the garage or on the highest shelf in a cabinet on a different floor. If you live in an apartment, put it in your storage room. Number 2, unplug the TV and carry it away. Put your TV in your storage room or garage during the weekdays. And yeah, sure, of course, you can plug it in during the weekend if that's what you want. But this is a really good step to add a lot of friction. And since this was a step to remove the cue, to make it invisible, simple, and a step to make it difficult to remove the response, this step is likely to have the most profound impact of all of them. Number 3. Get an accountability partner. Have this person call you every evening and make sure you haven't watched the TV. And if you have to send them $10. Now, for the reward, you make it unsatisfying. And I think this is also hard to work with when it comes to ego depletion. So to make it as simple as possible, focus on step 1 and step 3. Make it invisible and make it difficult. There's obviously a lot more to say about getting rid of bad habits, but this video is mostly focused on how ego depletion specifically affects your habits. And for those of you that have developed a certain level of discipline yet are unaware of ego depletion and you fall for it sometimes. But I do also need to mention a danger that you're now facing regarding ego depletion. It's important to be aware of ego depletion, yes, but not to the point where you allow it to become an excuse. Because I believe that's a big danger you're facing when learning about ego depletion. Because being aware of how it affects you gives you the power to work around it and actually outsmart yourself and trick yourself into doing good habits. But it also comes with a cost of risking using it as an excuse. That's why you now have extra responsibility to improve your life working around ego depletion. But what do I mean by using it as an excuse? I mean that once you start expecting ego depletion, it might become easy to just go, oh well, I can feel the ego depletion. I must have just used up all my mental resources and I'm just gonna go watch the TV because I don't have any mental energy left either way. If you start expecting ego depletion without taking action to prevent bad habits from forming, you might simply start to use it as an excuse instead. And I don't want that happening to you. Use this knowledge well and you can improve your life. Like all things related to self-improvement, if you don't apply it correctly, it's useless. I don't want this video to just be mindless dopamine for you. I want you to grow. If you want that for yourself as well, there's one other thing you can do. I currently offer one free 30-minute call where we dive into what your biggest challenges are currently and where you also get to see my 5-step process for long-term self-improvement. I'll take you through the steps and I'll point you in the right direction. To get this free call, you simply just have to fill out a really short little form that you can find in the top link in the description. And after you've done that, I'll see if you're fit for the call and I'll contact you shortly. Just remember to check your spam folder in case my email would end up there. So click the link, brother, and I'll talk to you soon. And until then, earn your sleep. And by the way, subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out. Please and thank you.